Good afternoon, everyone, and happy United Nations Day! It's my pleasure to welcome everyone to this virtual celebration of the UN 75th year, or UN 75. I'm Darren Espanto, a Canadian Filipino born in Calgary, Alberta, but I've been mapping out a career in the entertainment industry in the Philippines since I was 13. And now I am 19 years old. I am particularly proud of my role as UNDP Youth Advocate tasked to promote greater awareness of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals among the Filipino youth.
And I am Ria Ataide, an actress and TV host based in the Philippines. Aside from my work in the industry, I have also been advocating for children's rights. And Darren and I will be your hosts for today. But before anything else, we'd like to acknowledge the presence of members of the Diplomatic Corps in the Philippines, members of Congress and the Senate, and cabinet secretaries, undersecretaries, and assistant secretaries from the different government agencies who are with us this afternoon. Good afternoon. We are joined by our sign language interpreters, KZ Miroy. On the 24th of October every year, we mark the founding anniversary of the United Nations. This year, we celebrate the UN's 75th birthday, a milestone not only for the UN, but for the world community as well. And even as we struggle with the challenges brought about by the current COVID 19 pandemic, we are earnest to celebrate and honor what the UN has achieved in the last three quarters of a century.
Yes, that's right. This afternoon, let's retrace the history of the UN by listening to the stories of outstanding Filipinos who have made their mark in service to this global organization. We are pleased to have with us today Department of Tourism Secretary Bernadette Romulo Puyat, grandniece of General Carlos P. Romulo, who was one of the signatories of the UN Charter in 1945, making the Philippines one of the 51 original member countries. We also have Miss Marilyn M. Manuel, a true humanitarian committed to her work in the United Nations, work that has taken her to several danger zones over the years. She served in Iraq as a personal assistant to UN Special Representative, the late Sergio Vera de Mello. And also with us today is Ms. Heidi Liose Mendoza, who was appointed by UN Secretary General Ban Ki moon to head the United Nations Office of Internal Oversight Services, with the rank of Undersecretary General. Ms. Mendoza is currently the highest ranking Filipino official in the UN. Ria?
Our celebration will be enriched by musical performances by some of today's finest artists, such as Bayang Barrios, Jack Quintana, Rice Lucido, and Nitya Lila. And we'll get to know more about these talented ladies later. But for now, I'd like to ask all our participants and viewers to please share this live video on your social media accounts using the hashtags hashtag UN75 and hashtag shaping our future. And now it's time to kick off today's program, so please join me in welcoming the resident coordinator of the United Nations in the Philippines, Mr. Gustavo Gonzalez.
Good afternoon, dear partners, colleagues, and friends. First of all, I would like to express my appreciation to the Department of Foreign Affairs for coming together with us in this celebration of UN Day. A special thank you to Foreign Secretary Teddy Locsin for joining us. Since January, we are living exceptional moments with a pandemic that has affected our daily lives and unveiled our vulnerabilities. What started as a localized health crisis has unfolded as a global human crisis. The pandemic has shown that the system on which we depend, health, food, trade, climate, are not only increasingly interdependent, but increasingly fragile. For the first time in 30 years, poverty is going up. Human development indicators are declining. And the crisis demonstrated that we failed in anticipation. It also demonstrated we were not well prepared to recognize the simple fact that global challenges are better addressed with collective solutions. Someone said that in a globalized world, the future of any organization relies on its capacity to learn and transform. This is the time where lessons from the pandemic should inform our vision and support our action. And learning from this experience is not just preparing for future shocks, but also paying tribute to those who lost their lives as a result of COVID-19 and to those who are exposing their lives every day to win this battle. And I take this opportunity to commend on behalf of the UN country team, the millions of Filipino health workers, transporters, teachers, members of the security forces, and many others for their strong commitment in this fighting. One of the most important lessons from this crisis is perhaps the most obvious. We have to work together. No country can do it alone, and we need inclusive collaboration, drawing on the critical contribution of civil society, business foundations, the scientific community, local authorities, cities, and regional governments. As we say, anniversaries are not about celebrating the past. They are about looking ahead. The present troubles can't stop us reflecting on the proud history of the UN. The values of the United Nations, peace, justice, equality, and dignity, are more needed than ever. The organization we celebrate today emerged only after immense suffering. As you remember, it took 2 world wars, millions of deaths, and the horrors of the Holocaust for world leaders to commit to international cooperation and the rule of law. That commitment produced great results. A 3rd World War has been avoided, and down the decades, we had other historic accomplishments, including peace treaties and peacekeeping, decolonization, adoption of human rights standards, the triumph over apartheid, humanitarian aid for millions of victims of conflict and disaster, the eradication of key diseases, landmark pacts to protect the environment and our planet. And most recently, the unanimous support for the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement on climate change provided an inspiring vision for the 21st century. The recent attribution of the Nobel Peace Prize to the World Food Programme is another demonstration of the key role of the UN in tackling hunger and malnutrition. When I was appointed as UN resident coordinator in the Philippines, I remember a senior official from New York told me, "You cannot understand the UN without knowing the role of the Philippines in the organization." And now, with just a few months in the country, I realized that this person was not exaggerating. The Philippines is one of the 51 founding members of the UN, signing the United Nations Charter in San Francisco back in 1945. And as we know, the Philippines continues to be a very active member state. We have recently seen this engagement on a number of occasions, such as the participation in the Global Compact for Migration. The Philippines is one of the champions. In the Global Compact on Refugees, in the participation last year in the high-level political forum of ECOSOC, where the Philippines presented its 2nd voluntary national review on progress in implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. We have also seen another example of such engagement in the recent Human Rights Council, where the Philippines and an important number of member states agreed jointly with the UN to set up the first ever UN joint program on human rights. 2 years ago, the United Nations country team and the Philippines signed the Partnership Framework for Sustainable Development, which reflects the strategic support of 17 UN entities to the Philippine Development Plan. Most recently, as a result of the COVID-19, the UN country team in the Philippines has been working on 3 fronts. Firstly, the implementation of a large-scale health response guided by the World Health Organization. This intervention has allowed to support the Department of Health to carry out infection control and contact tracing, support public health communication to protect and avoid further spread, while also advising on well-being and mental health. Through the COVAX facility, the UN and the government of the Philippines are collaborating to ensure effective access to vaccination against COVID-19. Secondly, we mobilize a robust network of national and international NGOs, UN agencies, the private sector, around the Philippines humanitarian response plan, with the objective to address the most immediate needs of 5.4 million of Filipinos. This plan, which gathers the capacities of more than 60 humanitarian partners, is a concrete demonstration of a close partnership between government institutions, national and international NGOs, the private sector, and the critical support of the international community. Thirdly, we have started, since my arrival in June, a review of the existing programming and plans to better realign our support to the government in the recovery phase of the COVID-19 crisis. We are at the final stage of this process and will be shortly launching an innovative 3-year UN socioeconomic and peace-building framework for COVID-19 recovery, which will mobilize the whole UN development system in support of government's recovery plan. The framework will make the most of the capacities of 21 UN entities. It will harness the potential of innovative partnerships with international financial institutions and the private sector, and it will promote South-South and triangular cooperation. It will increase funding from SDGs global funds and will make sure that the country benefits from regional knowledge platform. I also take the opportunity to express our appreciation to the bilateral partners of the Philippines who channel contributions through the United Nations and make our work here possible. Please keep those resources coming. Your engagement matters a great deal. As we see, we face a foundational moment. Those who built the United Nations 75 years ago had lived through a pandemic, a global depression, genocide, and world war. They knew the cost of discord and the value of unity. Today, in some way, we face our own 1945 moment. If we are to emerge from this crisis stronger, better prepared to meet other crises and build more resilient futures, we must be united. We must act in solidarity to ensure that no one is left behind. This is the reason we celebrate UN Day every year. Thank you very much for being here with us tonight. Mabuhay United Nations, Mabuhay Philippines.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gustavo Gonzalez, for that truly inspiring message. The Philippines has been a partner of the United Nations for more than 7 decades. This partnership has grown stronger as the Philippines and the UN continue to work hand in hand to improve the lives of Filipinos. Let's now hear. I'm sorry, did I get disconnected? Am I here?
No, you're here at the yeah.
Okay, it disconnected me for a bit. Anyway, I'm sorry. Okay. So again, the Philippines has been a partner of the United Nations for more than 7 decades. This partnership has grown stronger as the Philippines and the UN continue to work hand in hand to improve the lives of Filipinos. Let's now hear the message of the esteemed Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Teodoro L. Locsin Jr.
Good afternoon. Happy United Nations Day. 2020 is the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. It was to be a landmark year of celebrating the UN's achievements. It had, after all, prevented World War III, its reason for being. Like stopping World War II was that of the League of Nations. No one was holding their breath after the Korean War broke out and let it out in resignation during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Instead, we are commemorating UN Day under very different circumstances. The UN meant to bring us closer together. COVID-19 has forced us to be apart. This virtual get-together is proof of how a virus has changed the way things were. We are again at war. The death toll has surpassed 1.1 million worldwide. But let's not exaggerate. It's bad, but not as bad as war by a long shot. This time, no armies and artillery, no tanks and bombers. But the enemy is not on the other side of the wire, but in our midst. Indeed, on our clothes and in our hair. Like a neutron bomb from nature's hell, it just takes out people and leaves neighborhoods empty, but everything else standing. It has forced families and friends to put up barriers between each other and communities to barricade themselves. COVID-19 restrictions have been so pervasive and prolonged that our behavior has changed in ways likely to last long after this virus has been defeated. It has made many ways of making a living impossible to do again. A quarter of a century ago, our forebears struggled to come to terms with a trauma that gave them no choice but to rethink the way they lived. The Second World War had left nations and societies in ruin, and world leaders facing a long, arduous road to reconstruction. But rather than give way to despair, 51 countries decided that having survived the scourge of war, they would spare succeeding generations from suffering it themselves. Thus, on June 25, 1945, they came together to sign a document that would be the architectural plan of a peaceful, progressive, and inclusive world order, the UN Charter. General Carlos P. Romulo, head of the Philippine delegation, declared, "Let us make this floor the last battlefield." That was their generation's foundational moment. Today, we stand at the cusp of our own 1945 moment. We face a global crisis that is killing people, spreading human suffering, and turning people's lives upside down. COVID-19 threatens to bring a recession, probably without parallel in the recent past. We risk greater instability, worsening unrest, and wider and crueler conflicts. This is much more than a health crisis. This is the world's most challenging crisis since World War II. But again, nothing could be as bad as that. But still, now as then, we must stand our ground, this time against the lesser angels of our nature, against our weaker selves, our lack of sustained resolution, our tendency to carelessness and think only of ourselves. When this is a threat we all face together, aimed at all of us without distinction. Together and never at odds with each other, we must face it head on and save all our people, because we cannot save just our own. If we are to be worthy inheritors of the peace and global order gifted to us by the generation of 1945, we need a much stronger global response to the pandemic. We, the peoples of the Philippines, are committed to work with the rest of the peoples of the United Nations and the UN's socio-economic and peace-building framework to beat the pandemic. The Philippines and the UN have a long, proud history of working together. We were there to lay the foundations of the UN, and even more there to make it work. In turn, the UN helped us build our country and keep it whole. The most recent being its support for the Bangsamoro Organic Law, ending nearly half a century of secessionist war that would tear it apart. The new UN resident coordinator has guided us in setting up the first ever UN joint program on human rights. We have been contributing troops to UN peacekeeping missions since the 1950s, and we have kept our pledge to support global peacekeeping to this day. We help shape the UN's blueprints for the future, the 2030 Agenda, the Paris Agreement, the Sendai Framework, and the new Urban Agenda. In all these, we insisted that people without countries not be left behind. We stood up to fight for the Global Compact on safe, orderly, and regular migration. We, the peoples of the United Nations, include we, the peoples who have lost theirs and never had any nation. COVID-19 threatens all that. The UN has to try harder. In particular, at this time of great uncertainty, I call on the United Nations to rally its member states, to set aside self-interest and work in solidarity. Nations break ranks in the race for the first COVID-19 vaccine. The UN must stand in the breach made by disunity to ensure that the less powerful, the less rich, those who cannot be heard, those who cannot be reached, those who cannot be saved. If we fail them, mankind will never be safe again. There will always be those who will remember that they were left to suffer or die alone, and they will number tens of millions, if not more. At one point in his life, General Romulo spoke despairingly about the future. He said, "I do not think the world has much time. I do not think it has much time to escape the momentum towards self-destruction upon which it seems set. Weeping openly, he asked what it would take to galvanize us into the necessary steps and actions to preserve the world against catastrophe. Only a common threat that none can escape without taking everyone else along. That alone would do the trick. General Romulo, ever prescient, might have been speaking about our current troubles. This is our 1945 moment. In forcing us apart, COVID-19 has ironically given us the chance to make a conscious decision to really come closer together and reshape our world to better effect. Let us build a future that would make the General smile. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary Locsin. Ria, did you know that General Carlos P. Romulo was not only a signatory of the UN Charter in 1945, he also served as the president of the fourth session of the United Nations General Assembly from 1949 to 1950, the first Asian to hold that position. He also served as president of the United Nations Secretary Council 4 times, twice in 1957, then in 1980 and 1981. That's quite an achievement. This afternoon, we'll hear more about General Romulo's remarkable career in the UN through his grannies, who is making her own mark in government service. It is with pleasure that I welcome the Secretary of the Department of Tourism, Ms. Bernadette Romulo Puyat.
Foreign Affairs Secretary Teodoro L. Locsin Jr., UN Resident Coordinator Gustavo Gonzalez, ladies and gentlemen, good day. I would like to extend my sincerest felicitations to the United Nations on its 75th anniversary, a milestone in its remarkable history. It is an honor to be speaking on behalf of the Romulo family about my granduncle, Carlos P. Romulo, one of the signatories of the UN Charter, who helped establish this august body as a means to promote international cooperation and world peace. CPR's legacy is an extraordinary, multifaceted one, and he achieved excellence in every field he engaged in. As a youth, he dreamt of becoming a journalist. He became the first Filipino to win the Pulitzer Prize for his pre-war correspondences, analyzing the military situation in the Pacific. He was also an English professor who became the president of the University of the Philippines. He was an aide-de-camp to General Douglas MacArthur, who rose to the rank of Brigadier General. He served as Secretary of Information and Public Relations under Manuel Quezon, the first of 8 presidents he would serve in various capacities, including Ambassador to the United States for 10 years and as Secretary of Foreign Affairs, a role he held for a total of 17 years. It was after the war in 1945 when he first represented the Philippines as a delegate to the first United Nations Conference in San Francisco. At the UN, he remained ambassador of the Philippines until 1956, earning the distinction of being the first Asian president of the UN General Assembly in 1949. He also led the UN Security Council 4 times as president. As UN president, he championed democracy and human rights and supported the quest of colonized nations to gain independence. CPR was widely respected for his diplomatic skills and distinguished himself through his eloquence. I would like to quote from the first speech he delivered in front of 49 other allied nations at the conference, which led to the signing of the UN Charter. In every human being is the craving and the right for recognition. In every normal human is the longing for peace. One of the oldest prayers in the human heart is this: let us have peace. The mountain of man's progress is great and terrible, and they who climb must adjust their pace. To the weakest, or the entire chain of climbers will go down. Until the weakest link in our human chain is made safe, not one of us is safe. We must determine here and now this basic pattern of understanding that will ensure world security. The speech received a standing ovation, an example of his powerful oratorial talent and ability to stir even the most hardened of hearts. It is also a passage that still rings true to this very day. At the same conference, CPR also did not fail to impress upon his audience the role of Filipinos in ending the war. Again, I quote from his speech: when the fate of civilization in the Pacific was in the balance, 18 million Filipinos, insignificant in number, their country, a mere dot on the map, helped to save that civilization for you as well as for me. This mere dot on the map would not have been part of the UN emblem had it not been for CPR's intervention. When he asked that the Philippines, although still a commonwealth at that time, be included in the logo, he was told that the Philippines would only be a small dot. All right, give us the dot, CPR said. He would thereafter be referred to as Mr. United Nations. The New York Times called him a towering figure at the United Nations, which is a delicious irony considering he stood at only 5 feet 2 inches tall and had to perch on top of a thick New York City phone book in order to be seen at the podium. Possibly the most famous anecdote about CPR's time in the UN was immortalized in his own essay called I'm Glad I'm a Little Guy, where he described how he stood his ground against biggest powers. The head of the Soviet delegation had mocked General Romulo by saying, "You're just a little man from a little country." Addressing the entire assembly, CPR retorted that it was the duty of the little Davids to fling pebbles of truth between the eyes of blustering Goliaths, displaying the kind of finesse we wish to see more of in contemporary debates. My granduncle proved to the world that he was no small man and that the Philippines would not remain an insignificant dot on the world map. He was always compelled to be outstanding and show that he was capable, not in spite of being a Filipino, but because he was a Filipino. His lifelong dedication to public service is a legacy bequeathed not only to the Romulo family, many of us whom only hope to follow in his footsteps, but to all Filipinos who seek to represent and serve their fellow Filipinos with the utmost dignity and honor. Once again, allow me to extend my warmest congratulations, especially to the Filipinos who have made their mark in service to the United Nations all over the world, helping to maintain peace and security, protect human rights, promote public health, battle climate change, and end world hunger. Carlos P. Romulo would have been very proud.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bernadette Romulo Puyet. Great leaders are crucial in building a better future for all of us, but change also starts with us. Everyone has a role to play in shaping a better future. The United Nations is marking its 75th anniversary through a campaign that aims to bring about the largest global conversation about future. It only takes 1 minute for your voice to be heard. So take the 1 minute survey at un75.online and let world leaders know what is most important to you and how we can achieve the future we want together. Again, that is un75.online.
Thanks, Ria. Now it's time for us to enjoy the first performance of the afternoon. World-class musician Bayang Barrios first gained prominence as a member of Joey Ayala at Ang Bagong Lumad. She has since continued a solo career that boasts 5 albums and countless live performances. A Manobo from Agusan del Sur, her music is reflective of her indigenous roots. For our Yun Day celebration, she expresses her deep aspiration for peace with her song Mapayapang Mundo, or A Peaceful World. Here she is.
Hi, ito po si Bayang Barrios, isang babae, ina, asawa, at mang-aawit. Naniniwala po ako na magkakaroon tayo ng magandang kinabukasan kung mabigyan ng malaking pagtugon ang edukasyon at ang ating kalusugan. Wastong serbisyo para sa mamamayan ang ibibigay ng gobyerno. Ito po ang aking panalangin. Maraming salamat po. Mabuhay po tayong lahat. Mapayapang mundo po. Sinulat ko itong awitin na ito base po sa aking paniniwala na ang kapayapaan po or kalinaw ay nagmumula po sa ating mga sarili. At kung wala tayo noon, wala tayong mabigay sa ating mga kaibigan, mga kapatid, sa ating bansa. Mapayapang mundo po.
Halina kaibigan, bangon at ating dalhin kapayapaan sa mundo. Kilos na kapatid, bigyan na ng puwang kapayapaan sa puso. Pag-ibig sa sarili, dalhin sa kapwa mo. Pagmamahal sa bayan, dalhin mo sa sanlibutan. Mapayapang isip, mapayapang tao, mapayapang bayan ay mapayapang mundo. Hindi na kailangan ang digmaan, hindi na kailangan ang hidwaan. Pag-ibig lang ang kailangan. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Higala pagmata na, bangon mag-atong dalhon, kalinaw sa kalibutan. Lihok na igsuon, tagain at higayon, kalinaw sa kalibutan. Oh, pag-ibig sa sarili, dalhin sa kapwa mo. Pagmamahal sa bayan, dalhin mo sa sanlibutan. Mapayapang isip, mapayapang tao, mapayapang bayan ay mapayapang mundo. Hindi na kailangan ang digmaan, hindi na kailangan ang hidwaan. Pag-ibig lang ang kailangan. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Pag-ibig sa sarili, dalhin sa kapwa mo. Pagmamahal sa bayan, dalhin mo sa sanlibutan. Mapayapang isip, mapayapang tao, mapayapang bayan ay mapayapang mundo. Hindi na kailangan
What a performance! Maraming salamat po, Miss Bayang Barrios. Peace truly is our universal goal. In the devastating aftermath of the Second World War, it was the vision of global peace that led to the creation of the United Nations. Sadly, wars and conflicts continue in many parts of the world, taking their deadly toll on so many innocent lives.
Our next speaker has experienced firsthand the pain of losing friends and colleagues in the UN as a result of conflict. Ms. Marilyn Manuel was the personal assistant to the former United Nations Special Representative for Iraq, Sergio Vera de Mello. Ms. Manuel was at the UN headquarters in Baghdad with Mr. de Mello when it was attacked by a truck bomb on August 19, 2003, which killed 22 people, including Mr. de Mello. World Humanitarian Day on August 19 of every year commemorates this tragic event. Let's all hear from Ms. Marilyn Manuel.
I'm honored to be part of the celebration of the United Nations 75th year anniversary. I thank the UN Resident Coordinator, Senor Gustavo Gonzalez, for honoring Filipinos who have worked at the United Nations and contributed years of their lives to the mission in this event. Today, as we celebrate the founding of the United Nations, let us remember the almost 4,000 UN peacekeepers who paid the ultimate price for peace. Let us also remember the 22 UN staff members who died in the first direct attack on the United Nations, including Sergio Vera de Mello, a friend, mentor, and colleague. The maintenance of peace and security was the main thrust when the United Nations was founded 75 years ago. Sadly, global conflicts have not ceased, and with advances in the tools for warfare, the toll on humanities has been greater. In my almost 23 years with the United Nations, I served in Somalia, Liberia, East Timor, and 2 tours in Iraq in 1997 and 2003. A few months after my return to the headquarters after my mission in Iraq, I joined the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, as personal assistant of Sergio Vera de Mello. Sergio, as everyone calls him, was a rising star in the diplomatic world. Rumored to be the next Secretary General, he was unanimously favored by the 5 permanent members of the United Nations to head peacekeeping missions at its initial stages. In March 2003, the military invasion of Baghdad started with bombings of infrastructures such as government offices, roads, bridges, and the airport. Widespread looting took place, and the toll on human lives climbed each day. In May 2003, Sergio Vera de Mello was unanimously approved to head the mission in Iraq. He knew it was a tough assignment, and he carefully handpicked his staff to hit the ground running. I hesitated to go, but Iraq has a special place in my heart. There was an air of distrust, uncertainty, and despair when I arrived in Baghdad in 2003. In early August, the unrest seemed to heighten. There were incidents of roadside bombings, and even the UND offices reported incidents. With all the conjectures and rumors floating on possible targets, we still believed that the UN flag, which symbolizes our neutrality, would be respected and thus protect us. August 19, 2003 started as an ordinary day. I was on the phone trying to get hold of New York when suddenly there was a blinding light, as if thousands of flashbulbs were on me, and I felt electrocuted by the phone. I groped my way out of the office, and in the dimly lit corridor, I saw the security of Sergio with blood trickling from his forehead. I felt sticky in my face and realized that I too was bloodied. Marwan Ali, a political affairs officer, saw me and brought me to the ground floor. There was total chaos. Those who were hurt were made to sit in the Canal Hotel front yard under the blinding light and scorching heat of Baghdad's afternoon sun. The US military arrived and immediately evacuated us to the airport, where the injuries were evaluated. I sustained lacerations throughout my face, head, and body, and pieces of small glasses were embedded in my left eye. I was flown to a desert makeshift hospital where I received blood transfusions, blood shreds taken out, and stitched. When I regained consciousness 36 hours after, I was told what happened. A suicide bomber drove a cement truck full of explosive into our building, targeting specifically the offices of Sergio. His office collapsed and he died after hours of trying to extricate him from the rubble. Slowly, I learned of good friends who died. Fiona Watson, Ronnie Benaventura, Rick Cooper, Jan Salim, and Nadia Yudis. These were friends whose futures were cut short and their families left behind. These were friends who came to Iraq to help broker peace, only to have their lives ended by violence. These were friends who believed that the United Nations flag would protect them as they performed their task. 19 August has since been declared as World Humanitarian Day to commemorate the men and women who devoted their lives to the quest for peace. I was once asked, since the UN seems not to have solved peace and security all over the world, don't you think your work has been futile? My answer is a resounding no. If my work afforded one refugee to find a home, if one child lived to adulthood, if one person was provided the means to have his meals, then my work has not been futile. I cannot change the world, but I can make a small difference. For me, this is what the United Nations is about.
Wow. Thank you very much, Ms. Manuel, for sharing your story. We are truly heartened by your resilience and your conviction that the pursuit of peace must not be abandoned and should continue to be the anchor of the UN's work and the goal that all nations of the world should work to realize.
Yes, I totally agree. Amidst the darkness, let us all strive to serve as lights of hope. We must learn from the lessons of our past and use this knowledge to build a brighter, more harmonious future for all. This is the view that our next performer shares in her song, Heli ng Maharlika, or Lullaby of the Noble. Ladies and gentlemen, singer-songwriter and multimedia artist, Miss Rice Lucido.
Helen ng Maharlika is a song of prayer and intention. It is also a reminder to everyone that although life may have uncertainties, it should not stop us to walk through and live. You know, the future may be clouded sometimes by the adversities and circumstances and the crises that we're currently facing today. But I believe with faith, persistence, and empathy, we'll all be able to conquer this battle. And I call for your active participation in making this world a harmonious place. By igniting that empathic nature within you, feel the world in its cries. Heal yourself as you embark in your own journey, your inner journey, and heal the world as you come out stronger. This song is a journey, a pilgrimage towards harmony and equilibrium. And I hope you guys like it. Ito ang aming dasal sa panahong gipit, ang umaga sa pagsipol. Ito ang aming duyan sa kaping ikaw. Ako sana ang sinusuyo. Saan lalayag ang puso kong naglalakbay? Di sisilip sa ulap ng umaawit kay tamis ng dala ng kaguluhan, tahanay kay lumisan sa mapaglarong isipan, sa kapihas ng hele sa mundo, umikot ng walang hanggan. Saan tatakbo ang puso kong naglalakbay, nagdidiwang, umagang muling sisilip sa ulap ng umaawit kay tamis ng dala ng lupang hinirang. Kami ay nananawagan sa iyong taglay, sa iyong gabay. Isipin mo kami sa inyong mga bisig mula sa
Thank you very much for that beautiful performance, Miss Rice. And now, over to you, Ria.
Thanks, Darren. Our next speaker is the highest ranking Filipino official in the UN. In 2015, she was appointed by former UN Secretary General Ban Ki moon to head the United Nations Office of Internal Oversight Services with the rank of Undersecretary General. She is a shining example of the UN's values of integrity and accountability. Let's all welcome Ms. Heidi Liose Mendoza.
Today we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. Ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Filipinos, former colleagues at the United Nations, indeed, the UN has gone a long way, building peace, improving the life of the less privileged, bringing food where others have not dared to set foot, saving lives, caring for our environment, empowering women, and fighting corruption. I cannot underestimate the contribution of the United Nations in resolving global concerns such as famine, disasters, resolution of conflict, and others. In the same way, I cannot thank enough the commitment and dedication of our fellow UN workers. Yours truly have been given the chance, no matter how brief, to share, work for the common vision of ensuring accountability. Allow me then to humbly walk you through. In December of 2015, I assumed the role of the Undersecretary General of Office for Internal Oversight Services, with only my sincere intention and an honest desire to contribute to the overall goal of an oversight office, given a noble but challenging mandate in support of the UN, and that is assisting the Secretary General in fulfilling his oversight responsibility, specifically with respect to promoting responsible administration of resources, improved organizational performance, and a culture of accountability and transparency. I came in the midst of a knowing leadership vacuum and a deep history of internal conflict, with the office tasked to assist the Secretary General in overseeing very important functions such as accountability in the use of resources of the entire United Nations Secretariat. Coming from a country with its own huge challenges, I honestly admit there is nothing much I can offer except my commitment and passion to do the best I can. It was not easy. What? When you haven't warmed your seat, but you were given the task to investigate the ex-president of the General Assembly. It was also the time when sexual exploitation and abuse continued to rise, affecting the effectiveness of the UN's peacekeeping missions. While I cannot imagine the load that the SG is bearing at the time, I, as the Undersecretary General of OIOS, shared that burden. It proved all the more difficult given the state of the office when I arrived. Very high vacancy rate, very low employees' morale, and a deep leadership vacuum and division. Today, I can say that from those daunting challenges were born the many opportunities for the office to regain its lost glory and reclaim its position in a community of oversight agencies. While we are crafting the lessons learned from this experience, on a parallel effort, we started engaging on new initiatives such as forensic interviewing of children, developing uniform guidelines for investigating SEA, all of which are in sync with the new approach and priorities of the current Secretary General. In July of 2018, before I took my medical leave, I was informed of the FBI indictment of those involved in the cases. And I only have gratitude to the entire team that conducted the investigation of the ex-president of the General Assembly. The then transition team of the then new SG has mentioned several times that our recommendations that we have in our report were considered extensively in crafting new policies and immediate steps. By providing inside information, which are not only factual, but also objective and well-researched, we provided significant inputs to the critical transition to the new leadership of the United Nations. Ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Filipinos, former colleagues at the United Nations, you may have observed that the nature of the work that was given to me was no different from the work I have embraced even before I flew to New York, pursuing accountability. Ang sabi nga po nila, ang paglaban sa korupsyon ay maiihan tulad sa pagiging ina, walang karapatang mapagod at magpahinga. To many, accountability is the center of democracy, and even within the comforts of our home, we cannot understate the importance of accountability. In fact, I'd like to think that it's in fact my work in pursuing accountability that earned for me the trust of member states and our Secretary General. From auditing the affairs of our very own government to the now well-known audit of the United Nations reimbursement funds to the Philippine government, to the audit of the Priority Development Assistance Fund, to the investigation and audit of the ex-president of the General Assembly, and the evaluation of the then incoming Office of the Secretary General. Our work has not ended. I went home not only to seek rest, but continue what I have been passionately working at, to continue to live the values of the United Nations, to speak and to make a stand where and when others choose to comfortably take their seats, to continue to struggle as we lay the stones that will lead us to our common road, a long and winding road towards peace and prosperity for every citizens of the world. And therefore, I wish you a happy anniversary as I leave to you the challenge. The work of the United Nations continues, whether within its historical building or within the unfamiliar terrain in a foreign land, or perhaps within the comfort of our own home. Mabuhay at maraming salamat.
Maraming salamat po, Ms. Heidi Mendoza. Moving on to the next part of our program, we are fortunate to have a second performance from Ms. Bayang Barrios. Here's Bayang with her second song, Iisa or As One.
Ang awitin po na ito ay sinulat ng aking kaibigan na kompositor, napakagaling na kompositor, si Ginoong Gary Granada. Iisang diwa, iisang adhikain, iisang puso at isipan. Dito po tayo magkakasabay at magkakasama. Iisa po para po sa inyong lahat.
Minsa'y nasanay na ng nasanay sa konting konsuelo, aliw sa dinami-raming pasikot-sikot ng buhay, napakadaling mabaliw. Kung ikaw ay nalalamig, ako ay nakikinig at nakakaintindi. At sa ibang na daigdig, meron kang kakampi. Ang pangarap mo'y pangarap ko, ang pasanin mo'y pasanin ko, ang damdamin mo'y damdamin ko, sinta. Ang kalayaan mo'y kalayaan ko, ang digmaan mo'y digmaan ko. Buhay mo at buhay ko'y iisa. At kung ang karamihan ng buhay pakikipag sa palaran, Mananataya ang pag-ibig kong tunay sa lahat ng labanan. Kahit na anong daratnan, hindi pagsisisihan. Ako ay naririto sa kaduluduluhan, handang sumama sa'yo. Ang pangarap mo'y pangarap ko, ang pasanin mo'y pasanin ko, ang damdamin mo'y damdamin ko, sinta. Ang kalayaan mo'y kalayaan ko, ang digmaan mo'y digmaan ko. Buhay mo ang buhay ko'y iisa. Ang pangarap mo'y pangarap ko, ang pasanin mo'y pasanin ko, ang damdamin mo'y damdamin ko, sinta. Ang kalayaan mo'y kalayaan ko, ang digmaan mo'y digmaan ko. Buhay mo at buhay ko'y iisa. Buhay mo at buhay ko'y iisa.
Thank you again, Miss Bayang Barrios. What a wonderful song. And our next speaker is one of the UN resident coordinators around the world who are leading the charge towards the achievement of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which is our common roadmap to a more equal, inclusive, prosperous, and sustainable future. Let's all welcome the UN resident coordinator in Cambodia, Miss Pauline Temesis.
Hello, I'm Pauline Temesis, Resident Coordinator of the United Nations in Cambodia. It's an honor to join the 75th anniversary celebrations of the United Nations in the Philippines, and a double honor to speak alongside Mrs. Berna Romulo Puyat, representing the late Ambassador Carlos P. Romulo, Ms. Marilyn Manuel, and Ms. Heidi Mendoza, all extraordinary Filipinos who served the United Nations. To be counted among these leaders is a privilege, and with privilege comes responsibility. Let me translate that responsibility in action by sharing what I've learned about leadership in the United Nations in 3 words: inspiration, courage, humility. Mr. Romulo himself was my inspiration to work for the UN. From his personal memoirs, I learned about how he gave voice to the voiceless millions and showed how a small man from a small nation could stand up to colonial powers in creating a less unequal United Nations. But as a founding father of the UN, Mr. Romulo shaped an institution led by men. I was fortunate to have joined the United Nations when it was mobilizing for the Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing. I worked with outstanding women leaders who became early role models. One of them was Irene Santiago. At that time, Irene was the convener of the NGO Forum on Women, where I worked as a volunteer. From Irene, I learned the value of grit, negotiation, and the power of networks. Irene single-handedly organized a 30,000-strong NGO forum alongside the UN conference, which demonstrated how the power of women, when collectively mobilized, can alter the course of history. Irene and the women activists taught me courage. To change how people believe, behave, and decide, you need to be ready to challenge power. And to do that, you need courage and purpose. Inspiration, courage with purpose, and finally, humility. Countless more Filipinos serve the United Nations around the world with the highest degree of professionalism, integrity, and respect for human rights. Many of them work in the UN without recognition, seniority, or titles. From them, I learned the value of humility, and with humility, the ability to adapt and reinvent ourselves according to the need of the time. I am able to serve as the Secretary General's representative in Cambodia because of the inspiration, courage, and humility that I've learned from Filipinos and Filipinas who have come before me in the UN. These leadership values are important now more than ever. As today we find ourselves in our own 1945 moment, the COVID-19 pandemic has turned the world upside down as we know it. To navigate this uncertainty and to turn the crisis into an opportunity, we need leadership that instills courage to act, make hard choices, and persevere in the long road ahead. We need leadership that fosters humility and the willingness to learn from mistakes. We also need leadership that encourages innovation. Looking to the future and in shaping a better new normal in a post-COVID world, I am convinced that the next generation of Filipina and Filipino leaders, be it inside the UN or in other platforms, will thrive because we know how to do more with the little that we have. We network, we mobilize, we challenge power and hold them accountable. We adapt and persevere. We don't let what we lack limit what we can achieve. This is our legacy in the United Nations. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you so much, Ms. Pauline Tameses, for sharing your message of solidarity. Did you know, Darren, that the United Nations is not only celebrating its 75th anniversary, but also the 5th anniversary of the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals?
Yes, that's right, Ria. As we celebrate the 5th year of the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals, I encourage the Filipino youth to think of how they can contribute to achieving these global goals. Share with us your vision of the future that you want by taking the UN75.online survey. It's easy and it only takes a minute. Go to UN75.online and be part of the conversation. Now, if there's anything we've learned from this COVID-19 pandemic, it's that unity and solidarity will get us through anything, through the rough times, and it's that sense of community that will help us become better and stronger as a nation. So let's continue to take care of each other. This is what our next performer wishes to impart as well. She is a staunch advocate of climate justice, taking part in the 2014 climate walk when she and fellow advocates walked from Manila to Tacloban to mark the first year since Super Typhoon Yolanda and to call for action to address the climate crisis. Tonight, she sings her song Tayo Tayo, or Together We Stand. To inspire us to come together as one nation, ladies and gentlemen, the very talented Nitya Lila.
Hi, my name's Nitya Lila Salo. I'm a singer-songwriter and an artist advocate for Dakila, Philippines. Today, I'll be singing Tayo Tayo. Tayo Tayo is a song about standing strong together. It is about a collective awakening and a collective call to action. We are waking up to a divided world full of injustice, and we are waking up to our power to change that. We are waking up to the vulnerabilities of broken systems, and we are discovering how to rebuild better ones. This has been a very difficult year for many, but challenging times give birth to our strength. We have seen so many people rising up, and that we are much stronger if we do it together. Natatanaw na pag-asa, natatanaw na hustisya. Tayo ay hinihintay na. We can only build a better world if we can start imagining it together. Sama-sama, tayo, tayo. Tayo, tayo, iyo, yo, oh, oh. Tayo, tayo, iyo, oh. Tayo, tayo, iyo, yo, oh, oh. Tayo, tayo, iyo, oh. Tayo, tayo, iyo, yo, oh, oh. Tayo, tayo, iyo, oh. Tayo, tayo, iyo, yo, oh, oh. Tayo, tayo, iyo, oh. Singin na ang katawan, kalambagin ng isipan, natatanaw na hustisya, hinihintay ka na. Kaliwat kanan, mabilis o dahan-dahan, mag-isa o may kasama, kapatid, kumilos na. Tayo, tayo, iyo, yo, oh, oh. Tayo, tayo, iyo, oh. Tayo, tayo, iyo, yo, oh, oh. Tayo, tayo, iyo, oh. Tayo, tayo, iyo, yo, oh, oh. Tayo, tayo, iyo, oh. Tayo, tayo, iyo, yo, oh, oh. Tayo, tayo, iyo, oh. Usad, usad, usad. Lakad, lakad, lakad. Tara na, tara na, tara na. Tayo na, tayo na, tayo na. Usad, usad, usad. Lakad, lakad, lakad. Tara na, tara na, tara na. Tayo na, tayo na, tayo na. Tayo, tayo, iyo, yo, oh, oh. Tayo, tayo, iyo, oh. Tayo, tayo, iyo, yo, oh, oh. Tayo, tayo, iyo, oh. Tayo, tayo, iyo, yo, oh, oh. Tayo, tayo, iyo, oh. Tayo, tayo, iyo, yo, oh, oh. Tayo, tayo, iyo.
Thank you so much, Nitya Leila. Darren, our distinguished speakers today are truly awe-inspiring, aren't they?
Yeah.
But did you know that there are so many other Filipinos who also served in the UN and left their own mark? Today, we are launching a coffee table book entitled Filipino Footprints in the UN, which is a compilation of 46 Filipino retirees who had served in 70 countries in 233 different posts as UN staff members. The book has been published by the Association of Former International Civil Servants, or the AFICS. Let's all witness this virtual launch of Filipino Footprints in the UN.
It is my distinct pleasure to be with you today on the occasion of the United Nations 75th anniversary celebration. I join the rest of my co-retirees and all members of the Association of Former International Civil Servants, or AFICS, in the Philippines in presenting you with this book that highlights what we would consider as our footprints in the United Nations system. Underlying each of our stories is a tribute to our own roots, the Philippine institutions, communities, and families that nurtured our formative years. From them, we drew strength and inspiration to go through our diverse journeys of service to humanity. We are indeed privileged to have served the United Nations in various capacities, duty stations, assignments, and missions.
This book is about 26 Filipino women and 20 men who gave their best to the United Nations and made a difference among the peoples and nations they served. As project director for this book, I can say that this was a project really worth pursuing. It is a collective product of labor, hard work, and commitment. The narratives revealed the richness of the experiences of the 46 Filipino UN retirees as they coped with challenges and navigated opportunities, allowing them to follow their dreams and fulfill their professional goals. For the retirees represented in the book, myself included, the work of the United Nations was all about Mission Possible.
essays remind us that history need not and should not be relegated to school books and classrooms. History is a living and lively account of what we were and are. It could and should be as real to each of us as stories of our family or about recent and past events. If all of that makes us understand humanity better, so does history make us understand ourselves and our country infinitely better in the context of our culture and our society.
We dedicate this book to all those who have served the United Nations,
especially those who have sacrificed and lost their lives while serving humanity, and the countless unrecognized staff and personnel around the world.
and to all future generations who may be inspired by our stories to join the ranks and continue striving for a better world.
And there you have it, Filipino Footprints in the UN. It promises to be an interesting read as it documents the hard work and dedication and the incredible legacy of service of past Filipino UN staff members. Thank you to all the Filipinos working in the UN everywhere in the world. You guys make us so proud. Now, hashtag shaping the future. I think that shaping the future for a better future should be a collective effort of the people. But what do the Filipinos really hope to see beyond 2020? Let's watch this video and hear from a cross-section of our society on the future that they want.
Dapat tayong mabuhay sa mundong walang kahirapan.
Kung saan walang taong nagugutom.
Ang magsasaka ay kumikita ng sapat para mabuhay ng marangal.
Ang lahat ay nakakapaghanap buhay ng ligtas at sapat ang kita.
Ang lahat ng tao ay may tirahan.
Ang bawat bata ay nakakapag-aral tungo sa pagkamit ng kanilang mga pangarap.
Dapat tayong mabuhay sa mundong makatarungan at maginhawa.
Kung saan ang lahat ng tao ay nakatatanggap ng ligtas, maayos at murang serbisyong pangkalusugan.
May malinis na tubig at palikuran. At nakakagamit ng makabagong digital technologies. Ang lahat ng kabataan ay nabibigyan ng tamang nutrisyon.
Ang mga babae ay nakakapanganak ng ligtas.
At nakakapagdesisyon para sa kanilang sarili ng walang takot at panghusga.
Kung saan ang bawat tao ay nakakaranas ng pantay na hustisya.
Dapat tayong mabuhay sa mundong ligtas mula sa mga sakuna at mayroong pagkakataong makabangon muli.
Kung saan ang lahat ng institusyon ay sama-samang umaaksyon para matugunan ang climate change.
At ang lahat ay nagtutulungan upang alagaan ang mundong ating ginagalawan.
Dapat tayong mabuhay sa mundong may dignidad, kung saan ang lahat ay tinatrato ng may respeto at pagkakapantay-pantay.
Sa trabaho,
Sa paaralan,
Mga institusyon,
Sa mga pampublikong lugar.
o sa sarili nating mga tahanan.
Isang mundong walang hidwaan, karahasan, pang-aabuso at diskriminasyon.
Isang mundo kung saan walang iniiwan at naiiwan patungo sa pag-unlad.
Dapat tayong mabuhay sa mundong kinikilala tayo bilang mga tao na may mga karapatan.
Ito ang gusto kong kinabukasan.
Maaaring malayo pa ang ating tatahakin para marating ito. Pero basta tayo'y sama-sama, kakayanin natin ito.
Nananawagan kami sa lahat.
sino ka man o nasaan ka man.
Sama-sama nating baguhin ang mundo.
Kapit-bisig tungo sa mas makataong mundo para sa lahat. Kapit-bisig tungo sa isang maaliwalas na bukas para sa lahat.
You've just watched the video of the collective voices of Filipinos expressing their hopes for the future. And your voice definitely counts in shaping a better future for all of us. So join in the conversations. Join in solidarity with the world. Answer the UN75.online survey and let the world leaders know your hopes and dreams on what your future should look like. Again, that's UN75.online.
Let us all shape our future together. And there is no better time to start on this mission than tonight, as we celebrate 75 years of the United Nations and look forward to a more sustainable and happy world in our future. Thank you to all our inspiring speakers and performers who shared their messages of peace, unity, and solidarity. And a shout out to our interpreters for the wonderful work they've done tonight. Thank you so much to KZ. And of course, Ria, we're almost at the end of our celebration. However, we do have one last treat for everyone.
Of course. Here to cap off our evening is a singer-songwriter and media professional who is a strong advocate of environmental rights, women's rights, and LGBTQ+ rights. But before we call on her, I just want to take this opportunity to thank everybody for joining us tonight for this landmark occasion of UN 75. Once again, I am Ria Ataide.
And I am Darren Espanto. Good night, everyone. Stay safe. And now we leave you with this magical performance of the song Bahaghari or Rainbow. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Jack Quintana.
Hi, it's Jack Quintana, a singer-songwriter and human rights advocate. I believe in a future where public interest, social equity, justice, and human dignity are the pillars of who we are. I see a future where we strongly and actively use our voices to respond to global challenges and move people to action. We can make this happen. Your contribution counts. 1 minute is all it takes. Answer the UN75 survey at un75.online. Let's shape our future together.
Iwanan natin ng mga anino. Ang pag-ibig ay pag-ibig, ang tao ay tao. Pantay lang tayong lahat sa dulo. Si Eva at si Adam. sisikat ang araw, dala nito'y maghalik, akin na tanaw. Ang ganda, ang ganda, ang ganda, ang ganda, tara na. Ang ganda, ang ganda, ang ganda, ang ganda, halika na. Ano man ang iyong kulay, sumigaw, gumalaw. Halina, kaibigan, kumanta, sumayaw. Palayain ng baghari, 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 palayain ng baghari. Fiesta!
Is